Kia ora and welcome to our DisruptED interview for today. I am really privileged to be joined on screen today by Perry Rush, who is head of our New Zealand Principals Federation, but also a principal of a school in his own right. So juggling those two jobs throughout this situation, I'm sure has been a rather interesting one. Perry, welcome in.
G'day, Steve. Good to be here.
For those that may not have come across you too much before, could you just give a little bit of an introduction, a background to your path through, because you've been involved in some pretty interesting places?
Sure, mate. So I'm about 30 years in the profession now. Went straight to teaching after school. At the moment, President New Zealand Principals Federation, and have been in this position since January. Currently principal at Hastings Intermediate in the Hawke's Bay. Did 12 years prior to that at Island Bay School on the south coast of Wellington. A wonderful, generous, forward-thinking school. Really innovative board. A very literate community. So that was a wonderful experience. Really invested in growing that sort of teaching and learning muscle there. Prior to that, 5 years at Discovery One School, the special designated character school above the crossing in Christchurch. And I was the foundation director there, so started that when it was just a concept and it was built at the time. That was just a tremendously exciting challenge. Kids' passions and interests driving learning there. That was the kaupapa in that school. And then before that, Deputy Principal at Tawa School in Wellington, where I developed a city site, which I think largely won me that position in Christchurch at Discovery. So the city site was a satellite class in the middle of Wellington CBD for our senior kids, and we travelled in by train and bus, and we're located in the heart of the city, engaged in rich real-life projects of learning in partnership with business and city entities, and it was just the coolest time. So I guess in summary, a real passion for kids being at the heart of learning, for learning processes that are real, are connected to the real world, integrated, and a real desire to just test convention. I've never been a very conventional thinker, so yeah, very, very, very excited about our education system in this wonderful country and the potential for it to do even better for the young people in our care.
Yeah, I think when I first contacted you a couple of days ago about this interview, I had said that my last interaction with you had been when you were at Island Bay and I was up the road at Wellington High School, and I, of course, knew about your history at Discovery One, and I had interactions with Jocelyn and that at Unlimited at that stage. So I had always really appreciated that that teaching and learning focus that you'd had. And then it was this year in my role as principal at Age School where I've been getting all the emails from you in your president's role. And I've really, really appreciated that real focus on well-being and that's come through there. So could you just talk through, I guess, a couple of those messages and why you feel that has been such a core message for our principals to hear?
I think the immediate reaction when we've been called into this period of remote teaching and learning has been that obvious consideration of how learning can be supported, of how curriculum can be enacted in remote, and I think it just really misunderstands the nature of what we're experiencing. I think at the moment, and we're engaged in a human crisis, and that crisis has on many levels a psychology to it that is connected to the essence of being human. Many of our whānau, many of our children and parents and communities are really struggling at this time, and I have this challenge in my own family community. That there are members of my family that have lost jobs and are struggling, and so it's a really worrying time. And I think we know, of course, this is in the DNA of Kiwi educators, that we consider the whole child. We always have. It's not about formal, dusty, off-the-shelf curriculum and how we continue that. In fact, it never is, of course, even when we're in our physical settings at school. But more so at this time, that question of just continuing to think about how formal learning occurs is just the wrong approach. We've always been excellent and expert as Kiwi teachers at integrating context into learning purpose. And I think our learning purpose at this time is to care for the kids, the young people in our care, to care for their families and find a way to continue to support powerful learning. And that's the challenge, Steve.
Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought there because I was so caught up in your message. Yeah. What are some of the first steps then that you feel school leaders should be taking themselves at this point?
Well, I think firstly to be working with their teams to really set that challenge in place. So to talk about that bigger picture, that whole child, the whole family, the notion that education at any time, but particularly at this time, is much broader than just reading, writing, maths, science, social studies, and the like. You know, that in actual fact, this time represents, in a funny way, an opportunity, of course. And the opportunity is that we are not in front of our students physically. We don't have the formal structure of schooling that controls our day. We don't know what young people are getting up to at any point in time. We don't know whether they've hung their computer up and they've gone to the refrigerator, or they've gone for a walk, or we don't know these things. And in actual fact, that I think releases us into a period of time now when we can let go of the reins with more enthusiasm than we might otherwise have been able or prepared to let ourselves do prior to this time. So, there's a really marvellous opportunity for us as leaders to give our teachers permission to ski off-piste, to go off and away from the usual, and to try supporting learning in a really different way, a way that more coherently puts the learner at the centre of teaching and learning rather than the teaching imperative. Yeah. I think that's the thing I'm probably most excited about.
Yeah. And the bit that I'm really interested in here, because it's the way that families will be operating at home, is what that then means when we start to come back into class, come back into school, and there's a whole bunch of students that are used to going, actually, you know what, this isn't engaging me. I've started to lose my focus. I'm going to go and get a bite to eat or have a drink now. And they're going to be used to actually this listening to their own bodies and doing this side of things. And it's going to be interesting how we actually manage that when they all come back into class again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, we will struggle to talk about a silver lining at a time of such significant crisis, of course. But there are changes that this will bring. And look, we would be remiss if we weren't really sensitive as educators and as leaders to what we can learn through this period of time that carries us beyond and into teaching and learning in a different way. We have to, of course, be sensitive to learning at all times. And I think there are some really significant learnings. But look, I've been worried for as long as I've been an educator about the dominance of the narrative that we work with in schooling. We've always lived in a very rational age. We see learning in curriculums. Those curriculums are enacted in those places that we think of physically as schooling. We generally think of it as one adult to about 30 kids over the course of 4.5 hours of contact time. These are ideas about how we've organised teaching and learning, and I think what we're experiencing at the moment is the complete flipping of that. And there's some sense for some of us that's very unsettling, and of course it is. But look, I think we don't have a choice about it at the moment, and that's not a bad thing because it's forcing us to think differently And I think we just have to be open to the lessons, and there will be some really powerful ones.
And so how do we ensure that those lessons are actually grappled across the whole system rather than just in pockets of it? How do we actually ensure that those lessons carry on for all ākonga across the country?
Well, we've got to do what we're doing, Steve, and really applaud this DisruptED TV, kaupapa, and it is about picking up the conversations. It's about pointing each other to the importance of the lessons, of the experiences we're currently having. I'm doing that again this week in my communication out to principals, and the conversation we're having now is very connected to some of the messages I want to raise with my colleagues. We've got to evolve our way of teaching and learning in a way that is much more personal for young people, and activates them in the driving seat of their learning. Of course, with powerful support from teachers as experts, that's really critical. But understanding how we can continue to grow and change and move in that direction is really key. And it's all of our responsibility as educators to contribute to that discussion. I think this time is sharpening that, and it's bringing it forward. It's bringing it into the foreground. We can see the challenges that this time is posing us now, and we can more coherently see the implications for our move back to the physical school site, and how this time might push us and grow us in new ways with our pedagogies.
And to me, I think there's been educators across the country for years sort of talking about these things, and a big part of why some leaders are often fear moving more this way is, but our community. To me, I see this now as a time when actually our community are going to be more on board with these approaches and this type of message. So how do we actually help bring the community along with this change? Because it is different from what they experienced at school. So how do we actually help them understand this is the why?
Yeah, look, and I think you're quite right. The actual experience of schooling taking place in the home at the moment is posing all sorts of interesting challenges and questions for parents. And I'm one of them. I have just sitting behind me my daughter at the moment, doing her home learning. So yeah, look, that's a good space to be in. I do think that we have a job as professionals in our profession to be much more confident about the responsibility we have to lead our communities. And I think this idea through our local curriculum that we consult with our communities on local priorities is absolutely fundamental to how local curriculum is designed. But I think we've made a mistake, and the mistake has been to seed our leadership, to seed our responsibility to be educational leaders in our community. We've ceded that to our communities to the extent that we run the risk of becoming service delivery agents for a whole range of ideas, some of which just aren't coherent educational practices. Look, that's we've trained for this. We know what we value, and we know what works for young people. It's our responsibility as leaders to stand up and talk to our communities, activate and ignite those discussions, and guide them into a future that we know is important for young people. Of course, we're going to be doing that in partnership, but none of that implies that we have to let go of the really important role to be effective leaders and to be confident in that work. So I would just say to principals, school leaders and teachers, talk together, evolve your thinking and lead. It's important.
Awesome. Look, I'm a principal of a very small school. We've got 40 students, so I can ring our 32 families. I managed to get through them all in one day, like a week after the lockdown began, to be able to actually go through and speak to each one of them and see how things were going, just set aside one whole day for that. But our school has had a real focus on passion-based learning and wellbeing and these sides of things that are now coming across that wider, across the wider system. And what I've really appreciated is seeing, yourself as president of the New Zealand Principals Federation really hammering those messages out to leaders across schools, because I would love to see this approach, really, really taken on from here. So I want to thank you for your messaging and your leadership in this, and I really hope it does help other leaders really step up into this challenge.
Yeah, look, and the as we've talked about, the great opportunity at this time is that it is just so fertile for new ideas and new thinking. And I have to tip my hat to teachers and principals throughout the country, because actually, like you, we've all seen the home learning plans that have been beautifully and generously shared. We've seen the vignettes of little episodes of learning where teachers have just come up with the most outrageously creative things. I've seen the lessons, or the tasks that my teachers at Hastings Intermediate have set parents to keep them just enjoying life and engage with their kids. The chocolate biscuit on the head that you had your hand tied behind your back, and you've got to get the biscuit into your mouth. And this has been filmed and posted, and kids are laughing alongside their parents, because it's a time that requires laughter. And that is the education that is important to support at the moment, alongside writing and reading and other really important things. So, this is a time of incredible energy in our profession, and we've just got to continue to support that occurring. We've got to push back on any sense of this being a competitive time, because it's not. We are all doing things differently. And we've just got to continue to let it flourish, let the flames burn and burn brighter, because it's a good time, a time of real growth and development, and it's just damn exciting to see it.
Well, I think that is actually a really inspiring message for us to wrap this interview up. These are designed just to be those short prompts, and if that's the message that everyone takes out of this, I think this interview has absolutely done its job. So from our DisruptED community, thank you very much, Perry, for joining us on here. From the principals community, thank you so much for your support and your messages over this year so far. What a time to step up to being president of the NZPF. And for those of you who are listening to these interviews on a daily basis, they are going up in the Facebook community, but they're also up on YouTube for those of you that aren't right into the whole Facebook thing. So please subscribe. They are coming up on pretty much a daily basis. Sometimes there's two. So again, Perry, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Steve. It's been a pleasure.